David, I don't know if you heard some of the stuff that I was talking about there.
Yep.
I do want to
listening.
thank you. I do want to thank you for your phrase that I just hadn't heard randomly one night. I was watching you on DLive. We'll put up your DLive address, and you were talking about just what we can believe in, and you came up with that phrase, which obviously you've heard other people say, but I just thought that's a good way of actually summarising stuff. Faith,
Well, that was
family,
really
and flag.
that was really what this country was built on, and it's funny. I was when you actually stop and think of where we are now as a nation. I'm pretty similar to you, Alistair. I think you're a wee bit older than me. Brought up, my formative years were sort of the late 80s, early 90s. This was still a proper country. I'm not saying we're not now, but we really were. The remembering of the victory of World War II. You had the Falklands conflict. You still had a very powerful British army. That's very kind comments there. And it really is to just where we are in the last sort of 30 years, this sort of both moral and societal collapse, where we have just this nothingness in the United Kingdom, because the UK was a unique nation on this planet. The Industrial Revolution was born in this country. And nearly everything you see around the world is a result of what happened here between probably the maybe 1750 to 1900, and is really forgotten that, and it really grates with me, all this stuff, like when, I'm not going to get too political on that side of it, but diversity built Britain, or where would we be without this? Was it Pax Britannica when Britain really was the global superpower from the end of the Napoleonic age, probably up until about 100 years, Britain, the United Kingdom, was a superpower, even more powerful than the US is now. The US is a global superpower, but it didn't have the land and the territory. And I was talking about this with my colleague Anthony Webber last night. Countries wanted to be governed by the British. When the Ottoman Empire collapsed, the British took over the mandate of Palestine because we were trusted to run it fairly, not support one other side, and actually try and have a peaceful state. That's again, colonialism bad, this evil country that don't, a lot of people actually like their lives improved, their literacy levels improved, their educational levels improved. So, people were very scared of talking about the British Empire and talking about it. But, the UK really was a unique nation in history. And I'm sure I've said this before, it kind of breaks the heart to see what's happened to it, but we are where we are.
Oh, absolutely. And you mentioned Pax Britannica. That's Latin for British peace. And the British did enforce, as it were, peace around the territories that we were in control of.
Correct.
And unlike today's American empire, and it most certainly is an empire, where we were organic, like we were in there with people running things and making schools and hospitals and employing people and businesses and so on. The American empire, such as it exists, is really just held together by force and bombs, unfortunately. Correct. And we're seeing that today. It's just like a brute force. Everything's just become like brutalized, and to get to in that particular regard as well, it's shocking the extent to which people have lost the faith, as it were. Now, I know Christianity, for example, is sometimes often can be used by people who are not really Christians. But there was, in the British Empire, there certainly was a true belief that what we're doing here is we're trying to spread the idea of Christianity. So there was a kind of governing ideology. The ideology wasn't, as the letter writer there that I quoted from from the Daily Telegraph. It wasn't, oh, we're spreading liberal values of, whatever those are today. We're trying to spread this eternal message of peace and goodwill and brotherhood among all men.
People really, I mean, what people need to understand is there has been a cultural Marxist revolution in the last 20 years. Now, there's not been any visual signs of that. There's not been any statues pulled down. Well, actually, there has been a few statues pulled down. Oh, well, there hasn't been any streets renamed. Well, actually, there has been a few streets renamed, but it's not been a revolution in the sense that, people think they watched it on Les Miserables, where, they go in and storm the Bastille, but they now look at World War I, World War II through this ideological prism. That, when these men were storming the D-Day, they were there to fight against fascism. I mean, that's not strictly true, because they were there to fight for Britain, for the empire, for Christianity, and as a land battle. And it's just it's so frustrating.
Oh yeah. Well, my paternal grandfather was a captain in the Royal Marines during World War II. And I mean, he couldn't have told you anything about politics. He didn't know anything. He certainly he would have trouble spelling like what is even fascism. He wouldn't even have heard of the concept. All he was there for was king and country. He felt it was his duty to do it, and that was especially among basically everybody who was fighting and during World War I as well. And my paternal family are from the Doon Valley, and a couple of years ago my father and mother took us to see a war memorial up in the Doon Valley just above Dalmellington, and the numbers of men from that area who were as poor as get out. I mean, they were just working in the mines, and they just felt this compulsion to fight for king and country, and they themselves had nothing to gain from it and everything to lose, and some of them of course lost everything in that sense, but they couldn't have, they weren't doing it for any enlightenment values or anything like that. It was
of course
just the king and country.
Well, that was what you were to do, that's it. And that was, there was a simplicity about things back then, and that you fought for your country.
Oh yeah, absolutely. And these wars did eventually end up brutalizing, I think, the human spirit in a terrible way that is almost reaching an apogee today, because as far as what's going on in the Middle East is concerned, obviously a force for good's not going to take sides on that particular matter, but it looks like you have to, and if you don't, then you're somehow supporting one side over the other.
It's just, it's just so it's just, I find that whole thing so childish, Alistair. It really is. Oh, if you don't stand with us, you stand with the terrorists. Now, that's not really how the world works. Was Switzerland in World War II, were they really Nazis? Because it's just so stupid. Like there is a concept which is known as neutrality, and what's interesting about this conflict in the Middle East that's erupted is the way in which people are just taking a side, because like, for example, Hamza Yousaf's come out, he's pushing that. Peoples who are unionists or pro-UK's initial instinct is, well, I'm going to go and fight. I'm going to stand side with the Israelis on this. Now, the reality is this conflict has nothing to do with us at all. I mean, it just doesn't. There's war all the time around the world. There's war in Africa all the time. There's an ongoing war in Yemen, which is brutal. And the reason and this war does matter to us is you have a substantial Muslim population in this country, and you also have a large Jewish population in this country who exert influence in politics, in the media, etc. And that's just a reality about it. Therefore, it kind of becomes our war as well. Now, everyone should be able to have an opinion and have a discussion about it, and have free speech and the ability to discuss it. But my argument is look, please don't get bullied into taking a side, because it's there's no need to do that. And this is, you were bullied during COVID that you had to take a side. You were bullied during the Ukraine war that you had to take a side. And right now you're being bullied by mass propaganda campaigns on both sides. But the majority of the Western MSM is taking a very pro-Israel stance and pushing like just fake news to elicit an emotional response in people. And people need to be aware that this is happening and just to calm down is my advice.
Well, I think that's good advice, and to take a deep breath and step back and not get into a situation where you find yourself promoting war propaganda for one side or the other, because war propaganda is intended to get you to hate and to kill your fellow human beings, which no
one should do. You know, that I am absolutely appalled, Alistair, at the behaviour of some people, because when these things happen, we do not share these things looking for social media clicks. And the amount of and I don't like using this term because it's overused, but real literal fake news videos completely. I mean, Donald Trump Jr. shared a video, and it was of a massacre in Syria from 2015.
Yeah, I know.
We're always getting, the BBC's always bombarding people with fact checks and the importance. Whereas here, I mean, there is just bombardments of it. And as I said, it's going on both sides. But then again, is it because people in the West have never fought in a war? They don't know the reality of it. That, well, I'm just sharing something on Twitter. Do they not realize that, you know, there's bombs dropping in Gaza, there's killers, there's terrorists on the run in Israel shooting people? Like, you know, this is serious. I think people are just, because they're so it's like they say in the military, these people that just fly drones. You know, once upon a time you were going out and you were putting a bayonet into someone. Now you're just flying a joystick and just pressing a button. You don't really have a sense of what you don't smell it. You're not on the ground. You don't see it, and it's dreadful.
Oh, absolutely. And modern entertainment is making that considerably worse, because these video games, and I don't play video games, but I know people who do, not only are they addictive, but they're incredibly realistic. And your brain cannot tell the difference between something that happens to you in real life and something that you watch. And I've always known that. And when I was growing up, there would be, in the 70s, there was like violent films, and you'd read these articles, people saying, it's only a film, it doesn't affect you. And I'm like, well, it does affect me. For a start, I saw that guy who's the lead actor, and I want to copy his hairstyle, right? So straight away, that's affected me. So are you telling me, how can films not affect me? You know, so you knew that was a lie, that films do affect you. And now, as I've grown older and wiser, I've realised that, in fact, films are used mainly for political reasons in order to move society certain ways, because, of course, they do affect you and they affect society. And with the realism as well, and the unnecessary brutality in a lot of films these days, and on Netflix, which is kind of less policed by the authorities, as it were, than Britain growing up in 1974. There's just unnecessary brutality, and people watch that.
It's war porn. That's what it basically is. Yeah. It's war pornography, and it's and again, it's what I don't like about this society now is it's so emotional now. Again, what this country prided itself on was having a stiff upper lip, that people didn't behave like Mediterranean types. We didn't burst into tears, and we had a different way of doing things.
Exactly.
And there was a calmness about it.
Exactly. Abroad was where everybody was always shouting. That's what it looked like on the news reports. And you're like, why are all these people always shouting? why can't they just be sensible?
And the other thing is as well, I say, and people don't like to hear this because, again, people have been so brainwashed by the propaganda. Christianity is a very different faith than Judaism and Islam.
Oh, yeah.
It's completely different. Whereas you've had this, again, cultural Marxist, well, you know, we all worship the same God and we're all from it. That is not true. If you're a Christian, you believe that Jesus was God incarnate, crucified, dead and buried and rose, and through faith in him you attain salvation. That is very different from Islam and Judaism, which are much more legalistic based. They are much more ritualistically based as well. Now, I'm not denigrating these faiths. I'm not attacking them. I'm just saying they're very different. And Christianity has a far greater place for morality and also the concept of sin and the concept of actions and belief systems. So that's why if you go to a Muslim country, it's a Muslim country. If you go to a Christian country, it's a Christian country. There are differences, but and everyone else gets that in the world. But obviously the West, people just, well, we're just individuals as part of getting on with our consumerist lifestyle and doing what we need to do to be able to do things. It's nonsense.
That's right. And some of the so-called Christians, you're absolutely right. True Christianity is about that. It's about actually loving your enemies.
Yes.
It's not about killing your enemies.
Correct.
In bloodlust.
And that the thing, and I've seen it on. This is the thing people aren't acknowledging. Both sides, the gallant. We're going to open the gates of hell. We're gonna. I mean, just really like Old Testament style talk. And the reason it's Old Testament is because Judaism is based on the Torah. And then, of course, you've got the Talmud, the Zohar as well, whereas Christianity, as you say, love thy neighbor. If you live by the sword, you die by the sword. Now, that's not to say that I'm a pacifist. There is such a thing as defending yourself in a just war. But the people need to realize that there are differences. The way we do things are different.
Absolutely. I just want a word on TikTok. Folks, we're actually interviewing somebody here that you won't see on TikTok unless you go to our YouTube channel, which is youtube.com/UK A Force for Good. That's why you're not hearing any sound when I'm not speaking, because we can't get a live interview here on TikTok. But we'll be back shortly. But you're absolutely right about that, David. And a lot of the accounts as well that are on Twitter, especially, that are MAGA accounts that claim to be Christian, they are clearly not Christian, or there's some strange kind of Christianity, because they're advocating literally leveling parts of the Christian Holy Land. Because people talk about the Holy Land, it's for the Jews. No, it's actually the Holy Land for all the Abrahamic faiths.
It's
Christianity,
terrible.
Judaism, and Islam. So.
And the thing is, just to clarify as well, cutting off water supply, cutting off electricity is a war crime. Let me read out a quote to you. Attacks against civilian infrastructure, especially electricity, are war crimes. Cutting off men, women, children of water, electricity and heating with winter coming, these are acts of pure terror. Initially, that was Ursula von der Leyen, and the first country she used was Russia. So Russia's attacks. So Ursula von der Leyen has said that doing that is a war crime. Now, this is what people need to understand. This is what is commonly regarded as a war crime, but people have been whipped up into such a frenzy and such disgust over Hamas, they are prepared to see what amounts to a pogrom of these people, and it's not acceptable. I don't want to see 3 million Israelis being treated like this. I don't want to see 3 million people in the Palestinian Gaza Strip being. I mean, everyone should be doing everything they can to try and de-escalate this, but people forget there's people making a lot of money out of this. Raytheon, Lockheed Martin, Boeing, all these military companies, and then there's other people getting a kick out of it. People need to just try and sit back and try and de-escalate, because that's what civilized people do. They don't rip each other's throats out and drink their blood.
Yeah, yeah. The problem is that the usually sensible talking heads in not only America but especially in Britain, they seem to have lost their heads, and in fact, it's shocking the extent to which it's happened, because you've got people that you normally respected and you thought were just sensible, and you were like following them on Twitter and YouTube and stuff like that, coming out with this psychopathic bloodlust
Yeah, yeah,
to
yeah.
basically level parts of the Holy Land, and there's no good consequence from that for anybody in the long
No,
term. And people
no,
like you and I can
no.
see the long term, and we always say, well, where is this going to lead? And as far as war in the
Correct.
Middle East is concerned, the only thing that ever happens for Britain is tens and hundreds of thousands of refugees, not just going into Europe, but eventually coming to Britain. And that's the only thing that war in the Middle East has ever brought us, or war in North Africa has ever brought us, and that's all that will ever bring us.
Yep,
If we get
yep.
into another major war with and
Well,
if this escalates into Iran and so on, that's decades of millions of people leaving these areas to come to Britain. That's the
well,
only thing that will happen. So that's why we have to be speaking about how do we get peace, how do we get diplomacy, how do we keep a straight head in all of this.
I mean, it could, and the thing I was saying is as well is what if you actually look at it, and there's been a number of rabbis that I've quoted on this. The Israeli army have been left highly exposed. The notion of Israeli invincibility is gone now. And what you have to realize is that they are fighting against people who have been brought up in what amounts to an open air prison. These people are prepared to go and die. They're prepared to blow themselves up. And that leaves us then, because this is the issue. People in the West are concerned about the rise and spread of Islam. They don't want to live in a caliphate. And I mean, I can understand that. But what I'm trying to argue is that there has been a campaign by Zionist-funded organizations in the Western world to conflate the issues that people face with Islam in the West to the same issues that people face in Israel. And just to clarify, we put out earlier, Netanyahu funded and supported Hamas because he wanted Hamas to act as a bulwark against Fatah, which was the secular Arab bloc by Yasser Arafat. So I put up the quote in the article. They wanted to create a division between Gaza and the West Bank to attack the secular Fatah group. And it's backfired on them. Where did Al-Qaeda come from? People just think Al-Qaeda just popped out of nowhere. Al-Qaeda got their weapons and their missiles from the Americans when they were fighting against the Mujahideen, were fighting against the Russians in the 1980s. Mm-hmm. If you give guns and weapons to these people, eventually they will be turned on you. And it was the same as well in Syria when Israel and the West supported the Nusra Front, which was basically ISIS, because they didn't like Bashar al-Assad. So again, this is what I'm just trying to say to people. You are being presented with a good and bad, good versus evil scenario. And what I'm trying to tell you is that's not really that's not true, because the Israelis have been to war with Syria, but the Ba'ath Party, when it was a pan-Arabist secular thing. So it's complicated. And again, people need to realize Hamas doesn't get on with Fatah. They don't like the PLO. Hamas is a Sunni militant organization. Hezbollah is a Shia militant organization. Iran is... This is complicated stuff, and this is where you just, in my opinion, we can talk about it, we can debate about it, you can go out and protest, you can demonstrate about it, but under no circumstances should any British troops or any British weapons be donated or any military support given to any conflict that opens up in the Middle East. It is as simple as that.
That's right. I think people understandably, in our country, they're, as we all are, distressed at the levels of mass immigration into the country, which have been brought entirely upon ourselves by our politicians.
Correct.
And we're all horrified at the growth of what we generally regard as foreign cultures in our country, and we see the long-term dangers of that. And for some people, being gung-ho for Israel is like getting their own back on the foreigners that they don't like.
It is.
In Britain, and I can understand how that kind of mentality works, and if I was much younger, I would probably have believed that as well.
I would 5 years ago, Alistair, I would have been full on ultra Zionist. I would have been saying all these things, but I've been and I am still very sympathetic to the Jewish people. I'm still very sympathetic to Israel, but I have to put, and I say to anyone who is a patriot or loves this country, we need to put our own country first.
100%.
Because as you point out, look at the state of it, and the mass migration that exists, and we shouldn't be getting, because look, this is the other thing people don't realize about mass immigration. People import their conflicts to us, and we just have to have a ruthlessness. Like, there's been this uproar of the Israel flag being taken down and replaced by a Palestinian flag. As far as I can tell, all I saw was 2 foreign flags flying over one of our town halls. There should be one flag that flies if there is a single flagpole, and that is the Union flag. If there is additional flagpoles, it should be the flag of the country within the United Kingdom.
Yes, I've noticed our politicians, they love to virtue signal and make a big deal about supporting foreign countries before they'll support their own country. I mean, they'll far rather fly a foreign country's flag than fly the Union Jack half the time. I don't know why that is. I think it's just because it's easy to do, and you don't have to deal with any fallout domestically, but there's certainly a tendency for them to do that, and to fly off to foreign countries while we've got problems right here in the United Kingdom.
It's so correct. It's so easier. Well, Ukraine's fight is our fight. Israel's, no, it's not. Our fight is for the heart and soul of this country, and to return it to what it was.
And by goodness, that's hard. That's a hard fight in itself. Well, that takes all, for those of us who care about those things, it takes our every waking moment to do.
And that's why they don't want to do it, Alistair, because fundamentally they do not have the best interests of this country at heart. Or this is just a job to them. They're a manager. That's what it's like. It's like you're a manager of a McDonald's franchise. Now, no offense, but you're just going to run it. Whereas if you're the owner, if that is your place, you're gonna do whatever you can to protect it and survive it. That's just the way the world works. But we have this class of person. They don't care. They don't know our history. They don't know what this country was all about. And we need to fight for our survival. And of course, I mean, being blunt, we can sell these countries weapons if they need them. That's the way the world's always worked, but we shouldn't be donating them. We shouldn't be really taking a stance on it. And
no, especially when all it's going to happen is it's going to end up in mass immigration into Europe and Britain again. That's all it's going to come from. That's all that's ever come from wars in the Middle East for us. And that's all that will ever come from any of this. Yeah. And people can talk, they should be crushed into the sea and all that kind of. That's just that's just language. Because in reality, all you're doing is just causing death and destruction, and that's no good for anybody.
No. That's the lie they told about the British Empire, because the British Empire didn't actually behave like that. Now, being an empire, being a colonial power, there was a streak of discipline to that, but this revisionism that we were these bloodthirsty people that went in and killed everybody, it's not how it worked. And it was what made us a unique nation, that we didn't just go in and execute everybody. and obviously there were incidents that happened, but you know, it pales into insignificance when you look at the wars America have been involved in, the millions upon millions that have been killed as a result of American foreign intervention.
Absolutely, David. It was such an interesting conversation about such a pertinent topic that I hadn't realised just how the time was shooting on there. So we'll draw this to an end. But I do want to thank you for making us think about these things and to make us understand that there is always a third way, in the sense that you don't have to get driven along by the war propaganda, which is always intended, from whatever side it comes, is always intended to dehumanize the enemy with the prelude of extincting them, which is not, to get back to the theme of faith, family and freedom and flag, is not a particularly Christian move.
No.
And in that sense, Matthew chapter 5, I think it is, when Jesus says, "Blessed are the peacemakers."
Peacemakers, correct. For they shall inherit the earth.
For they are the children of God, I think is the.
Well, you've caught me on my biblical quotes. Alistair, brilliant stuff. Thanks very much.
Good. Okay, David. Take care.
Cheers. See you later. Bye bye.